Was there ever a defining moment in your life that sparked your interest in science and more specifically in developmental and stem cell biology?
So when I was at high school, I had a great science teacher, so that's certainly what sparked my interest in science. But in terms of developmental and stem cell biology, which is really what I do today, it was really when I was an undergraduate at the University of Oxford. I was reading zoology, and one of my lecturers was John Gairdner, who those people in the field will know very well as one of the Nobel Prize winners fairly recently for his work on cloning frogs, really undertaking research that showed that all of development is written in our genes and that all our cells contain DNA that has that information, and yet somehow during development different genes are turned on and differentiation occurs. So that's what really turned me on to the underlying problem of how do we get from a fertilized egg to an organism. And John was the person who really turned me on to that question. And he's been pursuing it ever since, and so have I.
So for the diverse audience who subscribe to the Canadian Medical Association Journal, can you explain what are stem cells?
Stem cells are cells that have the ability to self-renew, copy themselves endlessly, make copies of themselves, and yet also retain the potential to differentiate into specialized cell types. You can have pluripotent stem cells, which have the ability to make many, many different cell types, or you can have quite restricted adult type stem cells, such as, of course, our hematopoietic stem cells, the first stem cells that were ever described famously by Tiller McCullough here in Canada. Or you can have very restricted stem cells, the stem cells that make sperm. Our stem cells can make many, many copies of themselves, but they only make one specialized cell type of sperm. It's the self-renewal capacity of stem cells that really is their special property.
So what role has the study of developmental biology played in stem cell research?
So developmental biology is really the study of the egg to the organism. And it has played a role in stem cell research in many different ways. The kind of research that I do, which is really trying to understand in a mammalian embryo, in my case mostly the mouse, how you go from an egg to the first stages of differentiation, which we call the blastocyst. That underlying research identified the pluripotent cells that lie within the blastocyst that give rise to the entire mouse. And it's understanding the processes and the growth factors and the pathways that set up those cell types in the embryo that allowed people to identify and isolate stem cells from blastocysts, first in the mouse by Gail Martin, by Martin Evans and Matt Kaufman, and then, of course, in 1998 by Jamie Thompson, who isolated pluripotent stem cells from the human blastocyst. Going on, of course, Shinya Yamanaka then took the information that we knew from development about the genes that specified pluripotency and was able to reprogram adult cells back to the early embryo by putting those genes into those cells. So that's one aspect, identifying and understanding what pluripotent cells are. But of course, when you want to take pluripotent cells and differentiate them into cell types you might want to use to study disease or treat disease for cell-based therapies, you have to understand how to make those cells go down specialized pathways. That's developmental biology too.
So despite great promise, there are still misconceptions associated with stem cell research. So what are some of the public's biggest misconceptions, and how has the public's perception changed over time throughout your career?
Well, clearly the early work with human embryonic stem cells was very ethically concerning because you take human embryos, and I think the public at large was misled by many people to think that that would involve really destroying babies. And of course that is not the case. I think the public has got the understanding much better now of what embryonic stem cells are and of course what the potential is. So I think that has moved forward. The other misconception that people have is that stem cells can cure everything. And I just told you with pluripotent stem cells, we're really at the beginning. Even with adult stem cells, we know some diseases and some treatments that really are effective. And we know that there may be possibilities for using other kinds of stem cells like mesenchymal stem cells that derive from the bone marrow but aren't blood stem cells. They may be helpful in certain cases to alleviate damage, prevent inflammation, have a sort of a paracrine effect on disease. But there has been a big push and a big hype worldwide in that those kind of stem cells could be used to cure everything, including stroke, as we heard today, cerebral palsy, autism. There's a lot of misconceptions that stem cells are now going to be a cure for everything. And that's led to a proliferation of clinics worldwide that are claiming unproven therapies. That is a big concern, and it's a big concern for the stem cell community at large, because of course the misuse of stem cell therapy could really put the whole field in a very bad light.
So among your many appointments, you currently serve as president and scientific director of the Gairdner Foundation. So what have been the biggest rewards and challenges in this role thus far?
So I've been president of the Gairdner Foundation for 1 year, taking over from John Dirks, who was the previous president for 22 years and did an amazing job in taking the Gairdner Foundation to where it is today as really one of the leading prizes for biomedical research worldwide. The prestige of the Gairdner Award, the International Award, the Gairdner Wightman Award, and the Global Health Award are really recognized internationally as the prizes that really give a measure of the importance of the research, and also, of course, are a precursor that hints that you might be going down the way towards the Nobel Prize. It's an icon for Canada, and in my first year, having worked with the Gairdner Foundation over many years on the various awards committees and so on, I've learned a lot in the first year. And in particular, what I've really learned going worldwide and talking to people about Gairdner is how respected this really is. How the international scientific community sees the Gairdner Award as a prestigious award, sees it as representing Canadian values, that Canada values science, values excellence, and values evidence-based approaches to the world.
As Canada's first female Gairdner laureate, what message would you give to encourage more women to pursue a career in the STEM fields?
I think that is interesting in itself, because what it says is that we still need to see more women coming into leadership roles in Canada and around the world. So we have huge opportunities for students of all sorts, so diversity, whether it's gender or ethnicity. We're really bringing in Canada people from all over the world to come and deliver and contribute to our science. We need to make opportunities available to everyone, and I think that we are seeing a huge increase in the number of women coming into STEM careers, but we're not seeing enough people going through to the leadership level. So part of my role as the leader of the Gairdner Foundation is to make clear that women are just as successful and just as likely to succeed as men, and that they're starting to do that in a big way. So we are really trying through the Gairdner Foundation to be part of the conversations about encouraging people to go into STEM careers, and certainly it's women, but also I'm seeing it as well in new immigrant populations. That this is something that is really open to everyone, and we really try and go back into the high schools and use the examples of people like myself to say, can be done. It's not easy, but it's not easy to go into any high pressure career. But science is a very rewarding career.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for answering these questions. It was an extreme pleasure to have the opportunity to sit and speak with you and gain a lot of insights as a young scientist, and see how fascinating a career like yours has been. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Welcome.
Thank you.